Hello dear managers. Faust here will be ranking the Dark Souls 1 bosses from her experience and enjoyment factor. Starting off, we'll start with the very first tutorial boss. Asylum Demon is quite a very ginormous being and quite popular amongst the From Software catalog, typically because Asylum Demon is reused multiple times in various different games. For example, in Elden Ring, they use it as their tree avatar. Now, Asylum Demon is a pretty good tutorial boss as it teaches from Faust's experience how to do a plunge attack, as well as showing how strafing is a huge important tool, as going across his fat belly in order to attack him is much more better than simply rolling. It also teaches how rolling away is a much more difficult proposal within the Soulsborne franchise, and typically it's better to roll in due to how his hitbox on his hammer extends all the way to his end of the hammer, which does have a higher hitbox than what Faust has experienced. For Faust's ranking, Asylum Demon would be a good key level boss due to how well it teaches the players, while also not being too drastically hard despite Dark Souls' reputation of being a hard game, at least to the gaming community. Reminder that Faust is not using any, and I mean any, sort of Google Doc or reading, so Faust is purely doing this from just voicing her opinions and talking. Moving on, we have the next boss, Taurus Demon. So this is in the Undead Burg, and as for his ranking, Taurus Demon is kind of in the similar vein as Asylum Demon. They both have the same theme, if you can recall, although Dark Souls 1 in terms of all the other in Dark Souls 1 in terms of the other games doesn't have that much variety in terms of OSTs. Taurus Demon also teaches how to do plunge attacks with the two archers in the roof and how you need to do a plunge attack for maximum damage, but it does teach one valuable factor, and that is an enclosed boss arena. While it's a very short amount of space to move, it teaches that you need to be wary of how positioning is and how important it is. However, despite all these factors, I would not include Taurus Demon to be in the same ranking, but a bit lower due to that factor. There are a bit of funny glitches that can be done with the Taurus Demon. For example, being able to make it so that you can make Taurus Demon jump off the cliff. Well, not cliff, the bridge, and it's quite funny to see. And it's a great part in showing how old Dark Souls 1 really is, in terms of all the glitches have always occurred within the FromSoft games. So I will be placing Taurus Demon in the 10th ranking. The next boss that people may encounter would be the Bell Gargoyles, and this is all the way at the top. Now, the Bell Gargoyles is a very amazing fight in terms of how it's aged. Bell Gargoyles is a fight between two boss monsters. Typically, this is referred to as a gank fight within the community. But what's unique about Bell Gargoyles is that he is one of the first few bosses where cutting off the tail gives a weapon, which is the Amazing Axe, if I remember correctly, which is a great weapon for newcomers. Additionally, Bell Gargoyles has a very unique AI. The second Bell Gargoyle comes when you lower the first Bell Gargoyle's HP to half, or 75%, and the AI is programmed so that one of them sprays fire while the other one does more melee attacks. And this makes it so that it teaches the player the importance of viewing one monster having two different bosses on screen, which is very helpful for the later bosses that Faust will be explaining. In this case, Belgargos will be, in Faust's opinion about ranking, as it is a very unique type of fight, and I also really love the boss arena, which is on top of all the way at the top. And it's very symbolic, as Belgargos is typically the first Bell of Awakening run, and that's a very huge factor in how monumental Belgargos is to the entire community. Although in retrospect, looking over the years, obviously From Software has improved their gang boss catalog, although there of course are still hit and misses. In other ways, Belgargo deserves a well ranking, and as for the soundtrack, that really doesn't have much of a discussion, as it's simply like that. Next down the line, we have some bosses that may not be in some specific order, but we'll start with one of the huge gimmick fights in this game, Moonlight Butterfly. Now, Moonlight Butterfly is very weird, as Moonlight Butterfly's reward, the shield, if Faust remembers correctly, isn't very spectacular. It shoots a ring and shoots a magic ring, which doesn't do that much damage. However, it is a very neat kind of concept. So, Faust will acknowledge From Software experimentation, which they love doing. Moonlight Butterfly, in Faust's opinion, deserves to be in a ranking from 10th in Faust's opinion. This is mainly due to the fact that overall the fight isn't very interesting. Faust remembers how the NPC summon extremely trivializes the fight, as it uses magic, which can't hit Moonlight Butterfly while flying. While if you're using a melee weapon throughout the game, the Moonlight Butterfly will just keep spraying magic at you until it goes down, which then gives you the opportunity to attack. However, Moonlight Butterfly will leave a gigantic AoE explosion if you're too late to escape from attacking it. While this is a neat concept, it definitely could have been explored more, and however, a huge prospect in From Software's catalog is the lore within the games. While it is a bit controversial of how FromSoft displays their storytelling and how they actually envelop the player's understanding of the lore, since they put them in item descriptions, in this game, Moonlight Butterfly has a very interesting lore, being related to Seath the Scaleless, which is a very prominent character within the franchise, as what Faust considers one of the most quote-unquote evil antagonists, and is definitely akin to how Faust is. It has some similarities to Faust herself, especially Goff's play. Now, in this case, Moonlight Butterfly would probably be in 10th. I would put it above Taurus Demon, and that is because Taurus Demon teaches the main theme aspects of Asylum Demon, while Moonlight Butterfly has a bit more variety despite the underwhelming fight. Moving on, we have the Gaping Dragon. Now, Gaping Dragon is within the very bottom parts into the sewers, and the Gaping Dragon itself is a great design, as it shows how monstrous that the dragon has become due to interacting with the abyss, Faust believes, which really shows how terrifying it is, and kind of, in a way, hypes it up within the DLC, which is very interesting. However, Gaping Dragon is a very weird boss, as the moveset is not that massive and isn't that interesting, albeit. Gaping Dragon has a gigantic leap attack that is able to hit you, and as well as how it takes forever for it to actually come down. It also has one of those moves similar to old Gen Monster Hunter, and technically still retained in new Gen Monster Hunter, the charge attack, which turns its entire body into a hitbox. This can be typically referred to as annoying, as it doesn't have any telegraphs to moves, which typically bosses in Souls games do have. This can be seen as considered unfair, and it's simply like that. They removed it in Elden Ring Night Rain, which is very interesting. They kind of gave it a telegraph and doesn't have that big of hitbox anymore. The interesting part of Gaming Dragon is the acid attack, or vomit. It melts away at your armor's durability and weapon durability, and can kind of ruin your weapon until you fix it, which is needed to be purchased via souls. And it also makes the players more aware of that certain mechanic, especially when going down to Blight Town. So, in this way, Gaming Dragon is a pretty well-established boss via the design and how its implementation in the story is. I really like how it's much more unique, and the teaser cutscene it has before its gigantic reveal, where it shows what people may think would be like a snake or not as creepy looking, actually be some type of horror that they probably weren't expecting despite Dark Souls dark fantasy genre. That also reminds me, Moonlight Butterfly's lore is very interesting with Seath, as Seath has experimented on many individuals, and this is one of his experimentations, and how horrid they really are. It really shows in Seath's character overall. With that out of the way, Gaming Dragon is a very low rank of He, and not all the way down to the top. Furthermore, another interesting boss would be the one in Blight Town, and where the second Bell of Awakening is run. That would be Quelaag. Now, Quelaag is very interesting. So, Quelaag is one of the few bosses that has area denial. Gaming Dragon is technically considered one of them due to the vomit, but his arena is gigantic, while Quelaag is less so. So Quelaag also has a phenomenal lore. Quelaag was one of the Chaos Witches, hence her name, and one of the sisters. She would, just like all the other sisters, such as Bed of Chaos, they'd suffer. And frankly, it's a very heartfelt and painful story due to meeting Chaos, which is Quelaag's sister, as an NPC. And the quest line between them is very interesting, as it also goes to solving and saving Sinclair. I mean, not Sinclair, Solar. Faust mixed them up. But that entire storyline is very interesting. In this case, Quelaag, let's go over her moveset. Now, Quelaag has a moveset of a very huge Flame Blade, which also is a boss summon that is pretty good. That a lot of people actually love. Faust for one also loves it, and it's a very unique type of weapon. Additionally, with how Quelaag uses it, it's very interesting. So she's able to do 2 swings and 1 large swing. It's very telegraphed and helps with players' intuition and when to dodge. She also has a gigantic AoE and the fire spit for area denial. The gigantic explosion actually has a major telegraph, which is very great and deals massive damage if you aren't able to tell it, which shows how dangerous it is. But it also shows how Quelaag is as a boss. The area denial factor is very interesting, and FromSoft will implement much more of it later down the line, and it's very, very cool in Faust's opinion. In this case, Quelaag would be somewhere around the Bell Gargoyles here. And that is all because of the lore and how the moveset is. The Fire Spit can seem a bit RNG or random number generated, but it really isn't, and isn't that much of a difficulty. It just makes the players much more aware of how to move and how important positioning is, as Quelaag's moveset herself isn't that dangerous, but much more how you need to be aware of which attacks to avoid. Understand. That also reminds Faust that Gaping Dragon, similar to Velgargos, can have their tail cut. Now, Gaping Dragon's tail cut weapon, from what Faust remembers, is also pretty good, but there are definitely better options. However, it's very interesting and shows how FromSoft is willing to progress in that way, as Faust believes it's inspired by a lot of the Monster Hunter entries with how cutting off parts can give materials, in this case weapons. So with that, I'll be leaving Quelaag in the WoW tier. Faust also believes the next boss that should be discussed would be Iron Golem. Now this is within Sun's Fortress, which is a very great area in Faust's opinion. So Iron Golem, actually before Faust talks about Iron Golem, let's talk about Chaos Quelaag. So Blighttown is a very controversial type of area. Faust believes it's very well structured nowadays, as back in the Xbox release where Dark Souls 1 would crash by simply arriving in Blighttown. The remastered version would fix that and make players much more aware of how well structured it is. Blighttown's depths is very interesting in looking at how you progress down, as you can't just simply go all the way down, but you need to fight various different types of beasts and dealing with mosquitoes while the slow sludge slows you down, and it really helps show the importance of getting materials to counteract the poison and venom, which is very interesting. And the Iron Golem in this way also shows how important Sen's Fortress is, as Sen's Fortress is very well structured too. There are many Titanite demons at the bottom, different axe saws, and this gigantic boulder that drops down, and you need to be aware of changing the lever at the top. It's a very well structured type of design and gives Iron Golem a huge value in when you reach it. While Iron Golem himself isn't very complicated, his kit is very simple. He has just simple axe slams, although they do have a bit of AoE or area of effect for your managers, and it's very interesting to see how more AoE attacks are being implemented. He also does a very sharp wind slash, which is very telegraphed and easy to dodge. Doesn't do that much damage either, but it shows that his kit isn't really that complicated and easy to understand. Despite that, Iron Golem does have one very unique gimmick, that being you can knock him on his legs after enough damage, and with that you can, if you attack him much more, he'll do a stagger and fall back further. This way you can make Iron Golem die much more earlier than his actual HP bar depletes by knocking him off the platform. In this way, Iron Golem is very interesting, as it shows another prospect of method to killing the bosses without just brute force. And Faust thinks this is very interesting. Iron Golem is also shown in many memes as knocking players off of the arena via the grab, which is very funny, as Iron Golem throws you when it lands. The Iron Golem throws you very far from the expected location, and I think Faust and G-Cell Shaft all think this is very interesting. And while Iron Golem isn't that complicated, it is definitely somewhere in the tier of he is. And in Faust's opinion, it would be right below Asylum Demon, with Gaping Dragon being a bit higher than Asylum Demon due to the interesting design. Furthermore, let's talk about another boss. One that is so easy that the community always makes fun of it, and if you lose, it is simply a skill issue, or get good, as they would say. Pinwheel. Pinwheel is absurdly easy, and Faust believes the main prospect or reason behind this is because most people or players tend to go down when you're too high level. Pinwheel's HP is significantly low, and it's very easy to simply kill him before seeing all of the mechanics. Now, Pinwheel's lore is interesting. Pinwheel is a father of a family, and he would akin to be stealing Nito's different ways of magic and doing in order to revive his family, if Faust recalls. Though they're given they're plastered all over his character model. And it just shows by the rare drops you can get from playing Pinwheel. You can get the different masks, which you give different buffs, which is a very interesting factor of how FromSoft went about giving buffs to equipment. However, let's go over Pinwheel's moveset. Pinwheel has a cloning magic ability that is very interesting. Pinwheel can summon multiple clones of himself, which can blast different types of magic, or whatever those projectiles are, which is very interesting as Pinwheel, as that attack actually does quite a lot of damage if you're not prepared. Pinwheel, which is why Pinwheel is seen easy, as Pinwheel is an optional boss which you can do to increase your flasks by killing him, getting the right of Kintai, which gives you the ability to exchange your humanities for more flat or Estus flasks. So Pinwheel is very easy, as Faust mentions, and the very gimmick of cloning is very interesting, as you hit them at one hit and they disappear, but you can summon multiple. However, it's not too hard where in the case of like how they have HP and you're not, but you keep summoning them and not allowing you to kill all. Faust finds the gimmick very interesting, and in other words, would be the high of test tier. However, his difficulty does kind of undermine it, although Faust doesn't believe difficulty is that significant if the enjoyment is worth it, but Pinwheel is commonly fought at a very high level, which ruins a lot of the enjoyment players have against him, as they cannot view the entire moveset. Next, Faust would like to talk about Stray Demon. Stray Demon is a reskin of Asylum. However, there is one change, and that would be the two attacks that have AoEs. These two attacks are very interesting, as the AoE is all in front of them and teaches much more and enforces more of the plot aspects of Asylum Demon, with the stray thing behind him in order to attack him, in order to avoid attacks. And otherwise, Stray Demon isn't all that different. And then this would probably be the first Zayn boss, as Faust believes it doesn't expand much. At most, it teaches the lore on how there's a bit more different types of demons across the world of Dark Souls and the trilogy in general. So not much to talk about there. Capra Demon. Now, if for Elden Ring players, Faust assumes you could know who Capra Demon is, as Capra Demon is also reused. Now, Capra Demon is a very hated fight, and for good reason. Capra Demon is within a very small part of a small area boss room, and not only that, Capra Demon is considered a gang fight due to the fact that there are 5 to 6 wolves or dogs that not only inflict poison or bleed from what Faust recalls, but they also are attacking you whilst Capra Demon attacks you. There is no sort of AI that makes them attack like how Bell Gargoyles does it, and it's not exactly telegraphed either extremely well. This makes a lot, and especially when you enter the attack, it is kind of unfair for the players, but Faust finds that a bit fun, and that's one of the reasons why Faust enjoys playing Soulsborne games. However, about the boss itself, Capra Demon has a very fair moveset if you exclude the dogs. All of his attacks are telegraphed, and while they do a bunch of damage, you can actually face tank some of them. Although you may have to be, if you're extremely low level, Capra Demon will be extremely hard to do that. Otherwise, Capra Demon doesn't have that much lore either, which leaves it to be a very underwhelming boss despite all of that, and definitely a reason why players are not fond of it. It also doesn't help that Capra Demon and Taurus Demon are actually copied multiple times within the second part of the game, which isn't very liked in general. This would be Capra Demon, in Faust's opinion, to be somewhere lower than high Zayn here due to that factor. However, Faust cannot deny that Capra Demon is very iconic, as the entire boss area is very memorable to anyone who has played Dark Souls 1. Moving on, Faust would like to talk about Gravelord Sith. Now, Sith is a very heartfelt and lovable boss, and that is not only due to the fact that it's a wolf and everyone loves puppies. Well, maybe, and there are some cat lovers that don't. However, Gravelord Sith has a very tight story towards, what was it? Artorias the Abyssal. Artorias is the main DLC cover character for the Artorias of the Abyss DLC, which is very interesting and well thought out. However, I'll also talk about that story much more in depth there. But Sith has a different cutscene if you defeat Artorias and the DLC earlier, which is a very unique aspect that From Software implemented, and it shows that they're willing to go out of their way to have much more effort put into that part. Sith also is very unique, as she doesn't have any extreme gimmicks, and Sith also has a confusing gender within the community. People think it's a she, while some think it's a he. While that isn't really that important here, Faust thinks it's important to note that Sith has caused quite a conversation in regards to that. However, moving on to the movesets, Sith has a very fair and akin to many different types of single 1v1 boss, night boss type of fights within From Software's catalog. It'll inspire many of them, such as Artorias himself, and it really shows how they began with it after the creation of Demon Souls with Penetrator and Old King of Land, which is very interesting. Of course, those two bosses are much more humanoid compared to Great Gravelord Sith, and Sith can be considered a beast type, which is much more explored within Bloodborne. Sith consists of many different sword strikes. He picks up the Artorias' great sword at his grave, which is a huge, beautiful cutscene, which you can see with the moon out, as shown in this image here. And Sith fights pretty fast, although of course not to the scale of modern Soulsborne, but it's still pretty fast. So if you're a new player and aren't used to it, you can beat quite a bit of difficulty. Sith is also very great in how telegraphed her attacks are, which is great, and Sith can prove to be quite of a challenge in this case. However, Sith has one very important factor that makes a lot of players love it, and that would be that when you hit Sith to a low HP, when 25% of HP is still there, Sith will start limping. It really shows the character's attitudes and their kind of traits without having full-on story depth to them, which is what From Software likes doing. They like giving a lot of hidden lore within item descriptions, but show a lot of their character with their design, such as Gaping Dragon, while also showing how they act, what they were like within their fight, which is great. With this, Sith is on some object. Faust also believes that Sith has one of the best OSTs and standout OSTs within, or original soundtracks within Dark Souls 1. That's a very important factor when viewing how it's a very somber OST, and Faust suggests everyone to listen to it as it's frankly really good. Sith would probably place somewhere. In Faust's opinion, Faust really enjoys this type of humanoid and knight type fights, so Faust would probably put it in bottom tier in this case. And Faust may move Quelaag a bit higher in this case. Although these can be a bit interchangeable. But moving on. Let's talk about Crossbreed Priscilla. Faust wishes Crossbreed Priscilla would actually be implemented into Elden Ring Nightmare, and that would be because of Priscilla's underused moveset. Now, Priscilla has quite a bit of lore. She is, as stated in her name, she's a crossbreed between a dragon and a god, and is locked away within the painting of Ariamis because of her life hunt sight, which is a danger to the gods. The life hunt sight is a bit underwhelming, Faust admits. However, Crossbreed Priscilla's design is very signified by it. She has a very unique moveset where she can turn invisible, and you have to pay attention to how she moves via her footprints in the snow. It's a very unique factor. However, she barely attacks when she's invisible, and her HP, as the same issue with Pinwheel, is significantly small. Crossbreed Priscilla also has a unique gimmick where it can cut off the tail for a dagger. From what Faust remembers, the dagger is pretty good, but it's a bit. But a lot of daggers within the game are quite useful because of critical attacks, which is very easy to do due to how you can either just riposte an enemy with breaking their guard or just going behind them and backstabbing, especially in the PvP sector of Dark Souls 1, which mainly consisted of just baiting backstabs. Priscilla also has a very interesting aspect where you can choose not to kill Priscilla, which makes it so that you just need the painting of Ariamis without doing it. It's a very unique kind of way of presenting a boss, and shows that it's an optional boss. However, outside of that, Priscilla is very underwhelming as what Faust mentioned earlier. She barely attacks within the invisibility state, and it really, outside of her lore, she isn't really that complicated or interesting to fight. So in this case, Faust would put Priscilla somewhere in the low heat tier. Probably, well, not low, a bit below Gaping Dragon. Actually, with the lore, which is very interesting, Faust would probably put it above Gaping Dragon, as Gaping Dragon has the annoying untelegraphed charge move that old gen Monster Hunter shares, such as with Rathian and Rathalos. Let's see. Before Faust moves on to Ornstein and Smough, I also like to discuss Gwyndolin. Gwyndolin is another one of those very gimmicky type of fights. Gwyndolin has a huge amount of lore to start off, being forcefully made feminine despite being a guy, and really shows how the gods viewed that symbol that Gwyndolin shares. And it really starts showing how the gods really were within Dark Souls, and how kind of replicates and parallels how Honor Londo is not the same anymore. Gwendolyn tries making the illusion of it looking very extravagant and noble or holy, but Orlando is left to ruins, really, as the gods decide to abandon, and just is an empty state, as mentioned, as shown in the actual map. And when you attack Gwendolyn, you'll break the illusion. It shows Orlando with the sun down, and all the shadow really shows how dark it really is. And it kind of also is a contrast to what the aged gods really were during Dark Souls. And it's a very interesting aspect of the lore. Now, as to the fight, Gwendolyn is constantly shooting arrows across the battle hall, which she will teleport after some time. I'm not sure if it's dictated by damage, but probably is, so both damage and time. The hallway is actually not infinite. You can't actually make it to the end, which is very interesting, but I guess Faust believes himself, just decided to give up on making it truly infinite, as most players, when fighting Gwendolyn, wouldn't need that much time. Outside of that, you're supposed to use the pillars as shown here. It's a bit difficult to see, but Faust shows that where Faust's cursor is at here. You're supposed to avoid the arrows via that way, as rolling isn't the only way to save way. Faust also believes Gwendolyn uses the magic teleport and sorceries, which is very interesting. Outside of that though, Gwendolyn isn't very that interesting of a fight. Faust does find the area interesting, but outside of that, it's really not that complicated or something that most players would enjoy. However, Faust believes the lore is a huge aspect of Gwendolyn's character, and certainly deserves higher than top tier, so Faust would put it somewhere above Gaping Dragon. Now, the highlight of Dark Souls 1 to many players outside of this two DLC bosses, Ornstein and Smough. Ornstein and Smough is the first Soulsborne gang fight that most players tend to remember fondly of. That outside of perhaps Storm King with the Storm Ruler's first appearance in Demon Souls, and the certain Armored Core fights that Faust forgot to mention, although the first video of this channel is kind of showing. Faust loves the Armored Core franchise, and Faust would love to do a tier list on the games and the characters further down the line, but Faust doesn't tend to do it now. Anyways, outside of that, Ornstein and Smough is, like what Faust said, a very recognizable gameplay, and what Faust believes many of the community still considers one of the best. Although some have changed their minds, which Faust would mention for a certain Dark Souls 3 boss, Demon Princes. Anyways, Ornstein and Smough is very interesting. So the very obvious contrast in their fight is very cool. Ornstein is a very fast hitter. Throws lightning, does a lot of jabs and dashes towards you. Makes sense because Ornstein also uses the Dragon Slayer spear, from what Faust remembers, and it's very interesting and a very cool weapon, and signifies Ornstein, as that's what he pierced the dragon scales with. He's also one of the knights of Gwyn. Now, Ornstein is another obvious contrast from Smough is an obvious contrast to Ornstein, as he is the heavy hitter. He holds the hammer, he's weighted, not really fast. He also has much more telegraphs on his attacks. So, you'll be paying attention to Ornstein while also paying attention to Smough in order to attack who you desire to be killed first for the second phase. What's also interesting is that whoever you kill first decides on what armor you get, as the second phase boss is what gives you the armor. Faust enjoys Ornstein's armor much more than Smough's, despite using strength more. As you Limbus and Project Moon enjoyers would know, Faust enjoys using the Swyhander, and so strength is obviously great. However, Faust will use Ornstein's armor. It's much more interesting. Now, Smough is typically killed off first, as well. It depends. Faust has seen different perspectives on which one is easier in second phase. Faust believes that Smough is actually easier, as the really only annoying attack is a gigantic AoE with lingering hitbox on the lightning when Smough does the butt snap. Faust believes outside of that, Smough is very easy, and you can very easily stagger him with any of the gigantic greatsword hits, for example, his white-hander. Now, Ornstein, on the other hand, Faust considers much harder. Not only does Ornstein also get this butt slam, Ornstein is significantly faster than Smough, and also has still throws lightning bolts from what Faust recalls. So it's a bit much more dangerous, but it's worth it for the armor. And this aspect is very interesting, as it's much more decision making for how the player plays and which boss they should kill first. With this, Faust believes Ornstein and Smough is the first left tier. Faust also should recall that Ornstein and Smough's OST is phenomenal. It shows the grandiose of Orlando and how the gods really were at their prime. Gwyn especially, and as Ornstein as one of the four knights, really shows their power, really. Alongside Ornstein's reputation, Smough has a very negative reputation. In the lore, Smough was a cannibal, and he's actually very buff under the armor within a lot of the books here. A lot of the artworks, and it shows how it's a bit deceptive. Smough's eyes aren't up there, but actually here. It's a bit interesting. It's very interesting. And it really shows kind of the fall of the gods and how they perceive the fall of Orlando, with them accepting Smough as a knight, really. There's a bit of more lore to them. For example, there's many theories on what Ornstein and Smough within Orlando really are, whether they're the actual knights or whether they're actually illusions made by Gwendolyn, because of how Ornstein's armor seen in Dark Souls 3 laid in the Archdragon Peak, awaiting the seeking for the Nameless King, as well as how Dark Souls 2 has another type of Ornstein fight, Old Dragon Slayer, which is many think is not actually Ornstein, however some theorize it is the actual Ornstein. Frankly, we don't really know. We can make a lot of assumptions, like how most of Soulsborne's lore really lies. In other words, it's very interesting. Ornstein Smough, the first deserving spot of the left tier. Now, moving on. Another boss that Faust will be discussing would be Centipede Demon. Actually, well, I will save Centipede Demon. Faust really should be Demon Fire Sage first, because it is a very fast choice. Demon Fire Sage is another reskin, although much more shown than the Strain Demon with all the fire effects and stuff. It's otherwise the same fight as the Strain Demon. It has the gigantic AoE. That's really about it. Demon Fire Sage also does drop a staff, which is a very cool weapon, but outside of that, Demon Fire Sage is not anything different. It's another shown reskin third time. Yeah, the same tier. Now, Centipede Demon. Centipede Demon is a very interesting fight, and Centipede Demon is also brought back to Nightmare, outside of the Gaping Dragon. Centipede Demon is very interesting, as you can cut off the tail in order to obtain the ring that lets you traverse through lava, which is needed for the next area, but although you do get it from killing Centipede Demon. It's very interesting, as his boss arena is kind of not well structured. It is a bunch of random lava pits, and some parts of land that you should stand on. However, it does force an interesting type of play where you need to bait him in order to do the tail attack, cut it off, get the ring, and now you're able to traverse to the area parts in order to deal more damage to Centipede Demon as you get much more positioning opportunities. Centipede Demon has a very unique design and one of the most terrifying cutscenes from Soft has done. His design is very out there. It's very hard to describe, monstrous, kind of akin to how Gaming Dragon is, but it's really hard to describe and shows how mutated and terrifying the flames were, as shown by what the flame did to the bed of chaos, or the witches of Isolith. Outside of that, Centipede moveset and weird isn't very interesting. He can get glitched out of the map, which Faust saw from a certain schemer, Blake, where Centipede can just jump off the map. Very interesting and very funny. Centipede also has a bunch of like bite attacks and what Faust calls. Also, that it's not really that interesting. But due to the design possibilities, it should be noted somewhere around Gaming Dragon, possibly a bit higher due to lower due to how simple but unique it really is. As Gaming Dragon has much more elements such as the vomit and the unique aspect of the lore with the Abyss tie-in. They're a bit interchangeable in that way. Faust also believes Centipede Demon and Nightmare is one of the easiest bosses too. Although cutting off the tail doesn't give that high of a loot cost, but outside of that, Centipede worked fine. The tail is able to execute during Nightmare, which is a shame it doesn't work in Dark Souls 1, but Nightmare of course improvises on how some of the bosses works. Now, Ceaseless Discharge. Very gimmicky boss. Ceaseless Discharge has a ton of AoE attacks that are very hard to roll. In fact, probably near impossible to roll, even with fast roll. From what Faust calls, you can still be Ceaseless Discharge, but all you have to do is bait Ceaseless Discharge's arm attack and kill him the legit way, which is silly enough to just attack that arm. Which is a back and forth and really not that interesting. What's very interesting is Ceaseless Discharge having a very new gimmick way to kill it, and counted as also a literal way to kill it, which is going all the way back to where the fog wall is. Ceaseless Discharge will do a large jump and lash his arm onto this area, which you get hit, and at some amount of damage, he'll get knocked off. Probably 75% of HP, and he'll get knocked off and instantly die. It's another aspect of how like Iron Golem, you can just simply kill them with the gimmick rather than fighting them for their entire HP bar or health pool bar, which is very funny and interesting. Other than that, Ceaseless Discharge has one notable factor, which is the lore. Ceaseless Discharge is also shared the same fate as how the witches of Isolith were tortured by the flame would heavily affect them, and it really showed like how dangerous it was. It formed his type of character, and FromSoft would implement a much more character trait aspect like Sith, where if you take the clothes of the sister that Ceaseless Discharge actually has a sister, which is the clothes, which were burned assumedly due to the clothes being there, and it shows how his discharge will awaken and fight you because of when you pick those clothes up. It shows his care and character. It shows how lovable he was before he turned into this abomination. His discharge will probably replace it. A very low heat here. Due to a lot of those three aspects, Faust is inclined to plus his discharge somewhere above Iron Golem. No, a bit lower in this game. interchangeable fast release actually. Let's see. Right. Now we can hit the big hitters and the lords, the ones who hold the souls. Now, let's talk about Better Chaos. As all players should know, Better Chaos is the worst fight in the game. It is so bad that Miyazaki had to actually. Lord Miyazaki had to apologize for its creation. Now, Better Chaos is. Let's talk about the good aspects. Faust already discussed how important the lore was, and Better Chaos is a very great lore aspect. Not only does the design convey how much they've turned, but it shows the torment that they've been put under. And they've become less humanoid, much more of this tree thing, which is very terrifying. It also shows a much more chilling aspect of how power can corrupt, which is shown very well in real life as well. Outside of that, that is really the only good parts. Which is why the storyline is very interesting, but that's all that really supports Better Chaos. Better Chaos is a horrible fight due to these various aspects. First of all, Faust believes that Better Chaos's entire parkour, where you need to make a cross to in order to attack each of the kind of baby or spawns of Better Chaos to lower down the shield and attack the main suspect and one-hit it, is not very interesting. That gimmick is very not interesting when you have these branches attacking you, which you can't roll because they have you can't fully roll because they have lingering hitbox, and you're bound to get hit and knocked down into these pits that randomly fall in the map. Or maybe not randomly, but they do fall in the map, and it's very easy to get hit into them. Even with a shield, which does help, you'll still get when you run out of stamina, you'll get hit with this weird animation, which lets them be able to hit you because your guard is broken. Furthermore, as you know, Soulsborne has never really had good parkour or such. With Elden Ring and Night Rain, much more improve it, much more having an impact, and with jumping actually being good. In Dark Souls, the jump really is a jump, and then you do a roll after, and it doesn't help with Better Chaos if you can get hit during it. It's simply not worth it, and is really a mistake, really. Better Chaos, not only that, doesn't have a good OST to make up for a lot of these issues, and it's just a sludge to get through. If only the only mercy that FromSoft has gave us is actually adding checkpoints after defeating each of the spawns for the Bed of Chaos. Meanwhile, I found one from what Faust remembers from playing the first release of Dark Souls, the Bed of Chaos did not have that, which is a pain. Now, Nito. Nito has a significant lack of lore, which is a shame because Nito has one of the most outgoing designs out of the four main bosses that were hyped up since the beginning of the game, or the Lord Souls in this case. And the cutscene really makes him out to be very dangerous. But Nito, in the lore, assumingly he just didn't care anymore. He just stayed in the Tomb of Giants in his resting area. And really, it's a missed opportunity, as Nito, with a significant amount of lore, would probably be very interesting due to his design and how Nito is presented. Now, Nito's OST isn't that bad. It's pretty interesting, but the very interesting factor, because the others are underwhelming, is the actual moveset. Nito you fight him within this very bottom area of the Tomb of the Giants, where he'll summon multiple skeletons, and which you could only really put down with holy weapons. Or, holy weapons. Or sacred, or from what Faust remembers, you need to bless weapons, and they need to put them down via that. What most people do is just put that on enhance that and attribute it to a stick. and go Unga Bunga, as Raja would describe, or Heathcliff would describe, which Faust finds very funny. After that, Nito's main moveset is his greatsword, which is very interesting. I really love the design of the weapon and how it's actually used in the game. It looks very cool. He's able to summon the sword without plunging into the ground and stab you from the bottom, from any distance from what Faust calls. He does a lot of sword slashes, typical of the, which is easy to avoid, and he also has this gigantic AoE he does with his aura. After that, Nito isn't very interesting, but the moveset it's a gank fight that is much more fair than what Capra would be, essentially. And it's a very unique take on how they do other bosses where they move it similar to that. With that though, Nito would probably be in this tier. Or, no left. Faust believes Nito deserves to be in the high heat tier. Probably a bit lower, a bit higher than Centipede. Yeah, Faust believes they should be interchangeable between these two, as they're both very gimmicky. Next, Seath. Seath has one of the biggest amounts of lore given to a boss, and it makes sense that Seath has a huge bunch of lore showing how he was very against his very kind, as he was shamed for being scaleless. This will lead him to betray them against the War of the Dragons and make him able to retrieve the Lord Soul given by Gwyn. Now, Seath is a monster. It's very easy to tell as you see all the experiments and how the Grand Archives conveys Seath's character. Later down the line, he'd influence many other types of characters, such as Osiris. And Seath has a very huge lore in this way. Faust believes Seath and Pontiff are the two most evil characters in this way, and it really comes off is not afraid to show that way to the players within the item descriptions. Also, that Seath's OST isn't all that interesting. The cutscene is very interesting to see, though. When you fight Seath, it flat out shows you like what makes him invincible, which he's been seeking within his lore. Which was the crystal, which if you simply destroy it, it shows his gimmick, and when you destroy that, you're able to actually damage him. I like how Seath's initial appearance in the actual game, when beating the Chosen Undead, is which is the protagonist, if those aren't aware, is him killing you and trapping you. It really shows, it terrifies you that he may have actually achieved immortality, but it shows a twist in that he actually never really did. Oh, that reminds Faust to remind me. For you managers, Nito actually has a covenant you can join, which is also another neat aspect of Nito, but not really that explored upon. Anyways, Seath has interesting effects. Seath does a lot of crystal AoEs, and Seath can inflict one of a very huge impactful status, which lowers your HP to 50%. Faust does not recall what it's called. Faust believes it's called Cursed. Anyways, Seath is able to inflict that upon you, and it's essentially unless you purchase it from where you fought the Bogart, you're not able to actually resolve that HP. It can make this fight a bit hard if you die However, Seath in general is not a hard fight outside of the gigantic crystal AoEs. Seath is able to fire lasers, but those are the ones that summon the crystals and they don't do that much damage. Seath also has a gigantic hitbox due to his weird underbelly or a bunch of tentacles, and it's unique because you can actually cut off the tentacles. The easiest way is at the edge, the very tip, which if you cut it, you're able to get the prominent FromSoft weapon, the Moonlight Greaser, which has been a staple within many of the games ever since all the way back, really, from their first games. For example, what was it? Not even in Armored Core, really, and yeah, Kingsfield and Armored Core held it. I also forgot if Shadow Tower Abyss did have it. It probably did. Anyways, Faust is a huge player of the FromSoft catalog in that case. Moving on. Actually, Faust also wanted to mention, see, with all of this, the fight is not that interesting, and outside of the lore and the aspect of getting Moonlight Greaser, Seath is alright. Probably around probably below. Actually above Dark Centipede in this case. Now, Four Kings. Four Kings also has a great place. New Londo was a place that Gwyn gives to these inhabitants, and it gives Four Kings for their help during the Dragon War, or the war against the Everlasting Dragons. Now, when New Londo would be flooded, however, in order to repel a lot of the abyss from what Faust recalls. It established a very unique character in this case, as you need to go all the way into the abyss to deal with the Four Kings. Four Kings is a gang fight done very well, akin to how Gargoyles is done. The Four Kings aren't as expected as Four Kings, however, they don't all spawn at you. It starts off with one, and when you attack with, at some time they'll summon another, and at some time they'll summon another. You want to deal enough damage to them in order to kill them before all of them spawn, as they're able to they have a pretty dangerous moveset. They have this gigantic sword that they're able to swing. They have this gigantic AoE projectile that's able to hit you, some kind of magic, and it's still able to hit you when they also explode from what Faust recalls. It's very dangerous to have all of them, as they'll be doing that attack constantly. So you need to kind of just damage them. The easiest method is getting HAAKO armor and voice tanking all of the attacks, and just frankly dealing enough damage before all of them summon before it's too late. It's a very unique aspect, and the abyss itself is a great area. It's just a gigantic void, and kind of embodies what the abyss really is. Although there's a new type of format for that, or idea for FromSoft has created, which is the Night for Elder Ring. However, it really encompasses how dangerous the abyss is, as it shows this strong before. Gwyn also never really truly cared for them, same as how like pygmies are, and really showed that the Vikings got really mistreated despite all their efforts in helping with the war. But otherwise, Four Kings is a great boss, and Faust would actually be willing to play it in the left here. And what, in fact, Faust would be Sif up here. Yes. The last boss of the base game is Gwyn. Which is quite, Gwyn has some of the best lore from Sonic. He's a god and the Lord of Cinder. However, when you reach Gwyn, he is a former shell. He is a shell of his former self. He became hollow because he's ran out of like motivation, and constantly burning himself to keep the world alight really was not good. It showed how he was greedy for power. He was terrified of the dark. This conveyed through his amazing and prominent, iconic OST, where it only plays light notes and no dark notes. It shows how he was terrified for his entire life, really. And throughout his entire life and the era of gods, that's really all he wanted to stop. He went against the cycle from naturally occurring, which was what made the world how corrupt it is now. In this case, Gwyn has some of the best lore, and it's really great to see it. Now, Gwyn's fight is very easy. This is simply due to the fact that all of his attacks, besides the grab and kick, can be parried, which is very easy to do with any shield. Obviously, with the smaller shields, it's very easy to do as they have higher frames of parry, and it lets you attack them essentially via that way. And you can just simply keep doing that and do critical strikes on them wherever post. However, for the action moveset itself, it's very interesting due to how Dark Souls 3 would later implement it. But Gwyn would summon lightning, throw it at you, or, well, in Dark Souls 3. But Faust will talk about that much more later. But right now he's just a hollow, so from what Faust calls, Gwyn actually doesn't throw lightning. Gwyn simply just flashes at you, does a beep, and that's really it from what Faust calls. Or maybe Faust kills him too fast, but that's what Faust remembers, and Gwyn's fight is still pretty dangerous. He still hits a lot, with his fire sword. Outside of that, it's like your basic knight fight set, and it's pretty good. With this, Faust would actually put Gwyn in lower left here. Or what Faust would actually put a bit higher due to lower. Probably it's not there. But due to the lack of unique aspects, it's really just a staple there. Now, Artorias the Abyss Walker. Actually, let's say Artorias for now. Faustly Sanctuary Guardian is a very important boss. Sanctuary Guardian is the first DLC boss, and kind of the wall for the DLC. Sanctuary Guardian is fast. Sanctuary Guardian has a lot of bite combos, which is very fast and kind of hard to dodge. And Faust was never able to truly roll both of them. Had to position. It shows the importance of it. Sanctuary Guardian has like some of these like attacks where they push the wave towards you, which stuns you but doesn't do damage. What Faust calls. Sanctuary Guardian also has some lightning breaths, which is a bit dangerous. And with the slowed effect given by the waves, it's a bit dangerous. Also, that Sanctuary Guardian isn't really that hard. What's very interesting is Sanctuary Guardian doesn't have actual lore, but Faust believes that it has a lot of connection to the actual DLC area, shown in the webtoon comic for Dark Souls, which gives a bit of a different perspective on the lore. Faust Very highly recommend actually watching it. Outside of that though, there's the dual fight of Sanctuary Guardians, which is just the dual fight when you arrive back, which isn't really difficult. It's just Sanctuary Guardian again twice, and the fight isn't here, but it's just literally that. If that Sanctuary Guardian deserves to be in well tier, it's very fun and doesn't need lore to back it up, but unlike these bosses where the fight isn't good but the lore heavily benefits it, Sanctuary Guardian makes up for it with moveset rather than lore, and it'll probably be somewhere interchangeable between these three options. Before we get to Artorias, let's do Kalami. We meet, starting with Kalami. Kalami is a very unique aspect because he's one of the first dragon bosses that I think FromSoft does well. Kalami, well, those have some weird hitboxes, as a lot of Dark Souls 1 bosses do have. For example, with some of his head combos, they have a bit like a lingering hitbox as well as the fire, which FromSoft really loves adding to their thing, but it's a bit hard to avoid. Kalami in general is a very great dragon fight, which FromSoft will later improve down the line with Bale, Midir, even Sin, and Caliga, which is some notable mentions of how much Kalami was kind of like the initial start to them, as Demon Souls really didn't have good dragon bosses outside of, say, the red and blue dragon really weren't really that great. Kalami really is the first standout, which is shown in this case. Kalami's design is awesome. It really shows his lore, which is he's one of the very few everlasting dragons are extremely dangerous, and Kalami really shows that, as you're really only able to beat Kalami with a go shooting him down, which is one of the 4 knights that were brought up within the DLC, and you get to meet him. His lore is quite interesting, but this is a video on the bosses and not him. But otherwise, it's very interesting. Go fire the shot, which keeps him down due to damaging his wounds. Kalami is, outside of that, has a very unique grab, which inflicts you with the Calamity status, which lets you take much more damage when you get hit. It's also funny because the Calamity Ring exists, which is literally it nerfs you and has that same effect when you put it on. Really funny. You can also cut off Kalami's tail, although it's much more harder due to Kalami's position, but you can do it via some of the attacks, like the headbutt, which he does, and some of the forward breath attacks he does, which leaves his tail wide open, which you get significantly cut off. Have time to cut off the tail, which gives another weapon. Faust doesn't remember what it was, but it was pretty interesting, although it wasn't. It was probably pretty good from what Faust remembers. Now, Artorias the Abyssal here. Artorias is the cover, the huge guy that mentioned that, and one of the most notable knight of one of the 4 knights. Artorias' lore and story is phenomenal. It's a story about how the Chosen Undead would carry on the legacy of Artorias and the tales, and how mythologies or stories may not truly be true to what they're portrayed as, but can be carried on by other people, and how putting an end to essentially one story is a great aspect to this type of story or plot. As Manus, which will be discussed here on, the Chosen Undead will actually be the one to slay it instead of Artorias. However, many people in the actual in the story would portray Artorias as the one who has actually defeated Manus. Of course, outside of the DLC arena, where those who know that Artorias is actually slain. Now, Taurus is one of the is similar to how Twin and Sif is done. It's one of the first few night one-on-one boss fights. Great Gravel Sith is also the dog of Artorias, or wolf, and it's great because they, as you can see, uses the Grey Sword of Artorias, and they have a huge connection with the quest line where Artorias actually saves Sith from madness via sacrificing his arm, using the shield, which gave a protective aura or effect for Sith, which helps him persist from the abyss. In the area right before the fall of madness. So Artorias is corrupted by the abyss, and you're fighting him essentially not in his prime, although it is a bit weird to say that due to how the abyss actually also buffs him. But we know this because Artorias is one of his arms, the left arm, is actually broken. There's a lot of discussions whether Artorias was actually left-handed or not, and if this truly crippled him. This is really depends on how you do it. We know Artorias probably wielded the Grey Sword or the shield with the left hand, or the shield with the right hand, as it did exist, but we don't really truly know if Artorias was left-handed or not. A lot of these things are kind of left to interpretation, which FromSoft loves doing for the player base. In Faust's perspective, Artorias was left-handed, and so he got extremely crippled, and now he's left in this extremely abyssal state. So the cutscene of Artorias is extremely badass. He stabs one of the residents of the town that's been corrupted by the abyss, and then throws it at you. It's awesome. And we get straight to the fight. Now, like Faust said, Artorias is a light one-on-one fight, very humanoid. They're one of Faust's favorite type of bosses. Now, he has a lot of charge stabs, which he can do further or do earlier. It depends. Obviously, he does more damage with that. With the longer built one, he's also able to throw abyss liquid at you, which does some damage. He's also able to do a triple backflip, or he can lower to 1 or 2, depending on your positioning and whether his AI can track what you're doing. You need to perfectly roll all them, as it still will damage you if you're not able to perfectly roll them, which is a bit dangerous, as they can actually flatten you and stun you on the ground, which is very dangerous, as you can combo back and forth. He also has a gigantic leap, which is very easy to dodge, and it's the main opening for the players do. Yeah, he'll do it when you're extremely far range. He also has he does a slash and then a roll. He also loves rolling. It's kind of mimics how player fights are with invaders and how they roll, and it really adds more of an aspect to Artorias that other bosses really don't have. Lastly, Artorias has this gigantic aura he can do. As he gets more corrupt and by the abyss, he's able to buff himself with his aura. I believe the aura doesn't actually damage you, but you can knock him out of that state. He'll do the gigantic AoE explosion when he fully buffs, from what Faust recalls, which you need to be aware of. And when he does actually complete his buffing animation phase, he's able to do significantly more damage. The buff is pretty extreme, and he can actually stack it, from what Faust recalls. So make sure he doesn't do that. Stagger him out of the animation by doing enough damage. Artorias also has a pretty noticeable OST. It's very gloomy, somber, as Faust recalls. It's akin to how a knight would be corrupted from his former glory, and Faust believe it's a huge aspect in a lot of Soulsborne games where you're not fighting them at their prime, which is very unique and very cool in Faust's opinion. After that, Faust would like to discuss how important Artorias is to Faust. Faust's main username used to be Abyss, and obviously inspired by Artorias, but Artorias was a very motivational figure outside of Dark Souls as a whole. Obviously, the lesson of just learning and adapting to your current situation is very important, but also the idea of constantly going, never hollow, as hollowing is essentially your loss of motivation and giving up. Dark Souls teaches you to keep moving, even if everything is tough, even if things get harder. It really is an important aspect of how Artorias has conveyed that even when he was dying, he still fought for Sith. It really showed, and for the people, as he was tasked to deal with the Abyss. So it's really interesting in that case. Now, Manus. Manus is... Yeah. Now, sorry for the event earlier, but let's go back to topics. Now, Artorias obviously deserves an L F tier. Faust actually enjoys Artorias much more than Ornstein and Smough, and Artorias is probably the #1 boss in Faust's opinion. Well, obviously, in everyone's other perspective, they'll probably put Ornstein and Smough higher, and due to variations of Manus, which will be discussed. Manus. From what Faust remembers, Manus is it has some great lore, like what Faust mentions. The webtoon comic for Dark Souls story does also go a bit in depth into Manus. Manus is a man who got corrupted by the Abyss, and much more levels to put here. And he becomes this extremely monster-fied personality, and he does get hyped up a lot. But what's very throughout all the Buddha town as you make it across, and how everybody is manipulated by the Abyss. What's furthermore is how Manus has a close connection to one of the characters. Manus pulls you from his time into from yours, as you guys are actually separate, which is why Sif has a different cutscene when you kill him, whereas Sif feels much more respectful towards you as he remembers that you helped him, as you can actually summon Sif against Manus. Manus also, like what Hal said, has a close connection to the NPC you meet, who you're saving, and who had via the what is it? One of the items you need to actually travel to the DLC, which is the Holy members is necklace or ring. Let's see. Yeah, the broken pendant from the Duke's archives, which is very important in a sense, where a lot of that Manus has a whole close connection to. As the Dusk of Ulucio was the one who held it, and Manus holds a close connection to it. It's a very important story as it shows Manus is actually perhaps very kind in the past. Outside of that, let's talk about the Crusade. I also believe that Manus has is one of the first few bosses that has like a very infinite combo. Well, not infinite, but has a combo that you cannot really escape from to get hit, which is the gigantic arm combo, as one of his arms is extremely massive and corrupted by the S, while the other one holds a staff, from what Faust remembers. If you get hit by a combo, you cannot escape, and he just hits you. It's funny seeing your characters bounce up and down from getting stunned, but Manus really destroys it. It doesn't do that much damage if you're high level, but I imagine when if you're playing low level, it'll destroy you. Manus, if you don't use the broken pendant to reflect, Manus also has a lot of like simple grab hits, staff attacks, but what's unique is Manus is able to throw these magic or abyssal projectiles at you if you aren't aware, and the only way to reflect them is to have the broken pendant and use it. If you don't have, or not broken pendant, an item. yeah, the silver pendant, which helps reflect all the magic. It's very necessary because he'll use Sartine at range attacks. However, it's still very dodgeable, but he has some of those projectile attacks that can do a bunch of damage. Menace is a very fun fight, and it's a beast fight that Faust really enjoys. The arena is also interesting, which is just similar to how the 14s are, except it's not just void. But you can get Sith to fight with you within the abyss. It's pretty awesome. Those are the Faust ranks. Madness, right below Ornstein and Smough there. That reminds me, for the area for Taurus, it's very interesting as you fight him within what was it? It's just you and a 1v1, no distractions, and you like in the gladiators, gladiator coliseum, which is great. And Faust got the rank colony somewhere here, probably. Remember that all these are interchangeable, depending on Faust's mood, but this is what Faust's ranking would be for the entirety of bosses within Dark Souls. Anyways, to end this off, Faust would like to thank you managers who've been watching, and Faust hopes you'll be there for the next video. And sorry for the lack of uploads, as Faust has been busy preparing for the new and recent Intervalo. Faust hopes to see you in the next video, and how you guys are going to be useful within Intervalo 8.5.